Thanks, Ben, for moving the clicker all the way over there. Great stuff. Seamless.
Seamless.
Right.
So yes, level 3, defeating the Horde. So I guess from a gaming perspective then, so we're reaching our climax of the game. We're about to fight our big boss battle, and this part we should be bigger and stronger and faster and other adjectives of a similar
It's
nature.
a Daft Punk song, is it?
It is. To be able to fend off more enemies than we would have done before. And the tangential segue into that is this section's all around scale versus disruptor, or disruptor.
There's a central tenet at the core of this next section, and I think it's been a great day so far, but I cannot wait for the next section. Is, can genuine change be affected by disruptors, or do incumbents, by their very nature, have to drive progress? Rich, that's us. Don't need to guess again.
So yeah, most of you will perhaps know that we gather platform data on flows that have come onto platforms. This is over the last 4 quarters, which have been some of the more testing quarters that we've seen in platform land. And we're trying to see whether scale results into a bigger share of growth, and whether disruptors can truly disrupt on it. And on the face of it, so here we've got our top 5 platforms, biggest platforms, and their share of the net sales in the last 4 quarters, and we've got the top 10. And on the face of it, there looks to be quite a close correlation between the biggest guys getting the biggest piece of the pie. Of course, if we're thinking of the top 10, we've got a whole host of different kinds of platforms that are in there, each experiencing some different fortune over the last 12 months. But on the face of it, you might think that, but it's a nice. It's got some big established players in there. Some with a history of disruption. Thinking of ones like Transact. Some that are going through big replatforming projects or have them on the horizon. It's a real dynamic space here. But I think the data kind of suggests here that there is an element of scale playing into this. But what can the disruptors do to disturb that business, and what can the established platforms here learn from the disruptors?
And there's another perspective to look at this from, and the truth is we could have, so back to State of the Advisor Nation data from last year, and we could have had a number of different questions up here, because when we start to talk about what drives selection, what drives satisfaction, what drives deselection, what would you invest, some of our thought experiments, what would you invest in if you had the keys to the kingdom in the financial services sector? And what we keep hearing time and time again from you in the advice profession are traditional metrics like service and cost, as opposed to things like innovation, as opposed to things like processes. That gets me thinking, is it the case then that the current generation of providers have evolved to a point where it's increasingly harder to put space between propositions, and that's the reason for this, on the face of it, entrenchment to traditional things like service and cost? Or am I wrong? Is there something else at play? And that is what we are going to explore in this next section. And I'm drawn towards an anecdote. I'm not going to name who the person is or who the platform is in question, but all the stuff we said earlier, Rich, on the panel session about that keeping us real and really getting real-world day-to-day insight. We all carry certain anecdotes on our shoulder as we go through certain parts of our working life. And this was an interview I held with a business owner, I think last year. It doesn't really matter who it was. And this person places their primary business on one of the smaller platforms, arguably a disruptor. And the way this person closed the interview with me was, she said to me, Steve, I almost don't want my current primary platform to succeed. Because in his or her view, everything they've experienced in the sector in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long they were working in it, they were nervous about this operator operating at scale. They were nervous about losing the experience, the nimbleness, the innovation that they experienced. And we're going to be all over this in the next section. Mark's going to take you through the main dynamics and going to talk a bit more about the game itself. But it's that notion at its core. can the smaller, disruptive, nimblers, innovators, how do they preserve that attitude and that ethos as they grow and as they become the establishment? And if you're at the other end, where shit's real with tens and tens and tens of billions of pounds of customer money and all the risk frameworks that you have to operate under, how do you maintain a disruptive mindset and keep innovating and keep at the head of your game?